What is something that happened at school to you that even now you are still mad about?
Starting my sophomore year of high school, I had very bad anxiety. I was vomiting multiple times a day from how anxious I was, and I became very depressed. I started missing a lot of school, and specifically, I was very anxious about my English class. Now, the reasons for that don't really matter, but basically, I did not want to go to that English class, and I would stay home from school just to avoid going to that one class. Finally, I met with my guidance counselor, who thankfully was very supportive, and I explained what was going on to her. She said, okay, this is ridiculous. You shouldn't be missing all of school just to avoid one class. We're going to work something out. For now, go to all your classes except your English class. Maybe we can put you on like a pass-fail grading system, and you can maybe just turn in your work instead of actually having to go in person. And after we had that meeting, I remember feeling like this huge weight was lifted off of me. I couldn't believe how relieved I felt. I felt like I could survive the year. It was incredible. So the next day, like my guidance counselor said, I come to school, I don't go to my English class, and then later that day, when I'm in my Latin class, an aide, like an assistant for the principal's office, comes and says, she needs to take me to my vice principal's office. We need to have a conversation. So I go with her. My vice principal starts immediately laying into me for having such a bad attendance record, for cutting my English class that morning. And at this point, I was just really not worried. I was very confident that it was just going to be fine. I was like, oh, my guidance counselor just hasn't gotten a chance to talk to him yet, and I can just explain. But as I start trying to explain, he just gets really agitated and continues berating me. He says, that's definitely not true. I must have misunderstood. There's no way the administration is ever going to agree to a deal like that. Why do I think I get to skip class? Why do I think I deserve special treatment? How is that fair to the other students? And I'm trying really hard to remain calm, but I start to cry a little bit. And I say to him, I don't think I'm asking for special treatment. I'm not going to get a good grade in the class. It's not going to look good to colleges. It's not going to help my GPA. But he just keeps telling me that I need to promise him that I'm going to go to my English class. So finally, I stand up, and I'm pretty much sobbing at this point, and I say I'd really like to leave now, and I would like the paperwork for dropping out of school because I don't think that I can continue if I have to go to this English class. At this point, he dials the main office and he asks them to send his assistant up and also to call my mom to ask her to come get me. When his assistant arrived, I asked why she was there, and he said it was because he didn't feel safe, because I was acting erratically and yelling, and because I stood over him. It's obviously possible to be antagonized by somebody who is physically smaller and weaker than you, but just to make it clear, this man was notably tall, like 6'6". I was 5'4", the same height I am now. There was a desk that was nearly 5 feet deep between us. He is taller than me sitting. There's literally no way for me to stand over him. It's not physically possible. I asked if I could wait outside for my mom on the grass because I was just sobbing and I wanted to get out of his presence. He said if I left, he would call the cops. So this story doesn't really have a happy ending because for the rest of high school, I remained intensely mentally ill. I was just totally miserable in my schooling experience. I barely graduated, in part because of this man. But there are some silver linings, so we'll talk about that. So my mom came to pick me up, and I told her what happened. And when I had calmed down, I told her that I never wanted to meet with my vice principal again unless she or my guidance counselor were present. And she agreed that she would support me in that. I'm very, very lucky to have had her support in this way. The next morning, I skipped my English class again and went straight to my guidance counselor's office, and I told her what happened, and I told her that I did not want to meet with my vice principal unless she or my mom were there, or both of them, and my mom had agreed and supported this. My guidance counselor notified the vice principal of this, and my mom, my vice principal, and my guidance counselor all met, and we agreed on a deal where I would not attend my English class exactly like me and my guidance counselor had discussed. I would get a pass or a fail based on my grades on a couple key papers and the final exam. For the rest of sophomore year and then all of junior year, anytime my vice principal wanted to meet with me, I would remind him that the guidance counselor or my mom or both of them needed to be there, and he honored that rule. After I turned 18, halfway through my senior year, he started meeting with me alone again. He continued to be the absolute worst in these meetings, but I was just mostly trying to get through it because I knew I was almost done with school and done dealing with him. Honestly, there are a lot more stories I could tell about my dealings with him and the other administrators at my high school, but for now, I'll just tell you about our last meeting. At my school, you needed a certain amount of PE credit in order to graduate, but you could get PE credit by doing extracurricular activities that were exercise, so you didn't necessarily have to go to gym class. You could be on a sports team or take karate outside of school. Every quarter, I had signed up to do like an independent study PE credit, but you're supposed to submit proof at the end of every quarter that you actually did something. I never submitted any proof and I never did anything. About 3 weeks before I was meant to graduate, my vice principal pulled me into his office and said, "So it looks to me as though you've never completed any PE credits whatsoever." And I looked him dead in the eyes and I said, "Yep, that sounds about right." And he said, "I think you and I both know that it would be best for you to leave this place. So I am going to sign off on your graduation." The only thing he ever did for me.
Not sure if this counts, but I got kicked out for drugs. I was 14 years old. It was springtime here in Michigan, and I have really bad allergies. So Sudafed used to make these little strips, little like Listerine strip versions of Sudafed. You just set them on your tongue, they dissolve, and you're good to go. Well, one of the popular girls saw me take one, and she told the vice principal, and I got removed from class. And I'm like, "What am I getting removed for?" And they're like, "Do you have anything in your pockets?" And I'm like, "Yeah." So I start pulling everything out of my pocket, and he grabs the strips up and he throws them back on the table and he goes, "What are these?" Then he went through and counted them to make sure that I wasn't overdosing myself on Sudafed strips. Then proceeded to try and call my mother, who was at work, so he called my father, which is not the person I would recommend calling. So my dad shows up and he's like, "What's going on?" And they're like, "She's kicked out for the next 14 days. And he's like, "For fucking what?" And they're like, "Drugs." Imagine walking back into school after that.
Yes, my time to shine. Before we start, this is my aesthetic. If you don't like it, click out. So in primary school, I'm one person that used to get bullied like a lot, guys. Oh, I used to get so much smoke due to how I spoke, how I acted, how I walked. Futhi, who walk was the most brutal one. But anyways, I think I was doing my 6th or 7th grade, and Besisa fresh, so we started like opening class group chats and everything. And I think it was 7th grade because Beskuluma farewell, and in the midst of us talking, people could not like establish like an agreement to which I don't know what we were discussing. But people could not just agree on one thing. So me being the mediator, being the Jesus Christ was in Nazareth, being I will take your sins, I sent a VN and I'm like, "Nah, guys, trying to maintain peace, trying to be the mediator, being, the Mother Teresa." And then there's this one guy. He's very notorious. He was known for being, an ass. So even the great child, they were giving. So anyways, he replied with like a paragraph. Guys, the homophobic slurs that were there, the insults. Child, I actually cried myself to sleep that day. And thank God I made a conscious decision to wake up. I'm not conscious because, but I made a conscious decision to wake up the next day, dress up, go to school. Because when I saw him, we locked eyes. He did not say anything. I'm still mad because I'm like, why won't I tell him? Njabulu, I even remember his name. I think Njabulu. Njabulu, I wish you nothing but hell, red, Adiwele, Satan.
When I was in the 8th grade, I was incredibly sick with chronic migraines. Like, we had something called hexters, which is like semesters, but there's 6 of them. I missed the last 3. Like, they all literally got around and they're like, "Hey, Mariah's been gone so much, but she's a really nice girl and a good student. I think she would have passed had she not had debilitating migraines. Let's just freeze her grades, and if she can make it, she can make it." So on one of the days I make it, happens to be bottle baby time. You know, where you fill up a 2-liter and I dressed it in my American Girl doll clothes. It was very cute. I had a really good time. But then came a school assembly. Remember when they would use child labor and then we would all have to sell our way into fundraising our own education? It was one of those, but they wanted participation from the crowd. I didn't want to participate. There were 1,000 people in the gymnasium. I wasn't feeling well. Now, I don't mind attention if I choose it. If I don't want attention and I get it, I'm not having a good time. They wanted to do a dance battle with the teachers, and they started saying, "We need 2 people from every grade." I bent in half and I stuck up my bottle baby like this so they couldn't even see me. I intentionally sat in the back row. I can't tell you how many girls in my grade are like amazing dancers, great personalities. They wanted to do it. They're raising their hands and the teachers were like, "Nope, not them." And I'm like, "That's super weird." And then I start hearing a teacher say, "Where's Mariah? Where's Mariah?" And then they physically came into the stands and dragged me down. And I was like, I'm the last person who wanted to be doing this. Why are you making me do this? I then have to get in a forced dance battle with the teachers. I wasn't happy to be there, so I did not participate. I did a little wiggle and I was like, I hate you all. And then it got worse. How could it be worse than dance battling your teachers, Mariah? In front of 1,000 people, Mariah. They'd hired a group called Acrodunk. It's just a bunch of men in trampolines dunking. They took all 6 of us and said, this is a 6-man dunk. A 6-man dunk is when they have people pass the ball back and forth. And then they were like, you get to be under the basket. Now, I played basketball all the time, so I was like, sure, here we go. So the ball keeps getting passed, and there's a grown adult man running full speed at me. And all they said was to bounce past the ball to him, and he was going to jump on the trampoline and jump over my head and dunk it. They never said move out of the way after you bounce past it. So I didn't. So then the guy freaks out, and he stutters. He's like, oh! And then they reset. And then the MC says, everybody chant, move, Mariah, move, when it's her turn to move out of the way. So then I bounced past the ball while collectively 1,000 people chanted, move, Mariah, move. And then I stepped back out of bounds. And he dunked. The people went crazy. And then I found out the group had called ahead of time and asked the teachers who would be a great participant. And I guess a bunch of my teachers said, Mariah is a really good charismatic leader. She'll get people involved.